From my experience and research, most older workers are clueless about their best and worst traits, as viewed by their younger peers. By older, I mean someone who's 50 and above. By younger worker, I'm talking about someone in their 20s or 30s. The 40s, well, I think of them as a cohort demilitarized zone. If you're in your 40s, it can go either way. Here are the worst traits. When we were in our 20s, we got annoyed when older coworkers sometimes didn't take our suggestions seriously. But that's exactly what we do when we ignore a suggestion just because of that person's age. And you can see where this comes from. If someone asks you questions and you're teaching them and maybe you're mentoring them, then a sort of teacher-student relationship switch can get set in your head. But that's not accurately seeing a real-life working relationship. In my career, I've occasionally caught myself doing this, and I've always gone on to regret it, and I've always had to go back to apologize. I must have done it other times and was oblivious to it. Always be sure to give everyone's voice an equal hearing. We annoy younger workers when we won't even entertain a new technique or technology. Sure, tools with a proven track record are valuable. You know how to use them, they're rock solid, they've stood the test of time. And sometimes, sure, a new hot idea isn't fully baked. But don't use that as an excuse to not even take a look at the new thing. Sometimes new things, even if they're only half-baked or three-quarters baked or 7/8 baked, can be very valuable. Looking back on my career, I've done this. There's been a lot of advancement in Python dependency management, and I haven't always been as open to new tools as I should have been. And I've had to catch myself a couple of times and say, I really should take a closer look at this. The third worst trait is pretty easy. Interrupting is a bad thing. Don't interrupt another person when they're speaking. It's rude. And you prevent yourself from getting all the information you can, which means you're doing yourself a disservice. Yes, war stories are wonderful, but younger workers get annoyed when we waste their time with an old war story. The kind of story I mean is about events in a company that no longer exists, involving obsolete technology, in a different world, different economy than what exists today. Especially if that story is negative or dismissive of what's happening in the company today. Look, if everyone collects the same number of war stories per year, then younger workers are going to be hopelessly outgunned, because we have 30 or 40 years of war stories and they may have only 5 or 10. If something that happened in your past is relevant to what's going on today, sure, absolutely tell the story, but be sure it's really relevant. Here's an example from my career. I worked for a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, aka DEC, and it no longer exists, hasn't existed for decades. There's a story from that company that has the title, Always Mount a Scratch Monkey. Now, this story is awesome. It's humorous, it's tragic. You wouldn't believe it if I told it to you, but it really happened. Always mount a scratch monkey. But you know what? It's not relevant to today. And you know what else? I'm not going to tell you what it is. Lack of passion is a tricky and touchy subject. Someone early in their career usually doesn't have the levels of responsibility that an older worker has. And by levels of responsibility, I'm talking about personal responsibility. They don't own a house, they don't have children, they don't have elderly parents to support, they probably don't have crushing debt. They also haven't had some of the disappointments that older workers have had in their career, yet. So a younger worker will tend to have more job enthusiasm, more company enthusiasm and trust than an older worker will. That doesn't mean that an older worker doesn't want to work hard, doesn't want to feel motivated, doesn't have the get up and go that a younger worker has. And it also doesn't mean that a younger worker is stupid. It does mean that the older worker has had certain kinds of statements before, certain kinds of stories, and knows how they may or may not measure up. The challenge for us older workers is to recognize when we're evaluating a situation clearly, or when we're just being jaded and negative about everything because, everything sucks because companies always lie, or what have you. If you're really jaded and negative to that degree, you should probably move on or move out, or in some other way give yourself a giant reset. In my career, I must have worked under, been exposed to, been involved with at least 25 mission statements. Half of them were just repetitive. They just repeated what some other mission statement said. A quarter of them were, had some interesting points, but it didn't matter a hill of beans. And a quarter of them were just blather. Hey, the customer comes first. Hey, we're going to do our best job possible. Hey, we're going to support each other. Wow, that's really like cosmic insight. I've also been laid off 3 times after being told how highly valuable I was. In one memorable instance, the division CTO told me personally, when he was sitting 6 feet away from me, that I was extremely valuable, and if there were going to be layoffs, I would be the last person to go. I'd be turning off the lights because I am the guy. And I am not kidding. 7 days later, he laid me off. Here's the point to you younger workers. After you've been through enough difficult changes, it's natural to not want to immediately quickly jump onto the next bandwagon that rolls along. Older workers need to not be permanently jaded about everything, not be permanently negative about everything, nor be overtly dismissive about what's going on in their company, because that is not just inappropriate, it's also unprofessional. Older workers have some pretty great traits as well. Younger workers usually don't have the perspective to interpret big company events. And by this I mean a layoff, a giant management shakeup, salary freeze, what have you. They would get there eventually because they're just as smart as we were, as anyone else, but they don't benefit from the mental shortcuts, from the perspectives that our past experience gives us. When you've experienced something before, you can put the problem in context and be able to show why the situation might not be so bleak. We older workers can be appreciated when we share an informed perspective, a balanced perspective of a big event. We can allay fears, we can help the team remain cohesive, and we can help others see constructive options instead of just sitting around and complaining about, oh my God, look at this, thing that just happened. We can be a force for good when the company is in turmoil. Sometimes management doesn't communicate as openly as they could or should. Sometimes there's a good reason for this. Maybe there are legal constraints on what they can say. When these sort of situations happen, younger workers can have difficulty reading between the lines. We older workers, because we've been through a number of these transition situations before, we can help read between the lines and explain to them what might really be going on. Knowing when not to speak is a talent. We should lead when we can and not hesitate to speak from experience. But sometimes it's best to not dictate the right answer, even when we know it. We are often appreciated when we let younger workers sort of have the same learning curve experience we did when we were their age. Yeah, you might know what the right answer is, but you help the team grow and develop mental muscle when you sort of step back and keep your lips zipped and let others work out what the right thing is. This is especially true if you're a team member, even a senior team member, and not its formal manager. The rule I use is speak up sometimes, but not all the time. If time is not of the essence, if it's not a crisis situation, it's okay if the group takes an extra 5 minutes to figure something out. The final really great trait that older workers have is what I call timeless knowledge. Every occupation has techniques or technologies that have stood the test of time. Older workers are appreciated for sharing their knowledge about age-old tools, maybe not age-old, but long-lived tools, and their sort of arcane tips and tricks. For me in software engineering, this might be sharing information about the Emacs code editor. If you're not in software engineering and you never heard the word Emacs before, that's okay. Consider yourself blessed. Sometimes the crufty tools are in fact battle-hardened, and you can count on them in any situation. So there you have it. The worst and best traits of older workers as seen by younger workers. Till next time, take care. This is the point in the video when the content creator says, please click the subscribe button, please click the like button, please post in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. I'm not going to tell you that because you already know all that. I've enjoyed making this video. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.